Welcome. We are so happy that you joined us. My name is Dr. Michael Caldwell. I am the Associate Vice President for Vaccine Research and Education at Meharry Medical College.
And I'm Chardae Foster, and I'm a second-year medical student at Meharry Medical College.
So great for you to join us today. We are going to talk to you about an issue that we've been working on a lot, and that's how to improve clinical trial diversity. But we don't want to just think about doing it incrementally, as a lot of our colleagues across the country have been doing. We want to really show how we can moonshot clinical trial diversity. And Chardae, how are we going to do that?
We're thinking about improving clinical trial diversity solely by increasing the diversity of physician investigators.
That's right. And through that, we are going to introduce to you today a new concept of the National Center for Clinical Trial Diversity. So we are both, on our next slide here, show Meharry Medical College. We're at a really special place. It's a historically Black school. It was founded almost 150 years ago in Nashville, Tennessee. And Chardae, you wanted to come to Meharry because it is a special place. So how is it being a medical student there, and why are you there?
Yes, being at Meharry is very special. Its main mission is dedicated to serving the underserved, and it's a mission that I really wanted to be a part of in terms of giving back. And I also really wanted to hone in on that in terms of my research.
And you're doing a great job, and I'm just so happy that we worked together over the summer. So Meharry has a lot of great history and a lot of great things ahead for its future. So the next slide, we're going to see our president there, Dr. James Hildreth and Michael Bloomberg. They did an op-ed in CNN, and the title of their op-ed was "To Save Black Lives, We Need More Black Doctors." Now, we talked to Dr. Hildreth about this, and we thought we could extend that idea. And what was it that we came up with?
So we were thinking, if we can improve the lives of Black individuals, Black patients, then by actually increasing Black doctors, then why not increasing Black physician investigators or more diverse physician investigators in order to increase the number of representation of these groups within our clinical trials?
Yeah, that's right. We felt that there's been so much focus on just taking the existing infrastructure of clinical trials and just trying to get them to do better. That's good, but it's incremental. We want to change the whole pipeline. So the next slide shows something that came to our attention in April, which was the FDA guidelines. They came out, but it was a draft document, right? It was from April of 2022, and they invited you and me to give comments. And we said, hey, the FDA wants us to comment. Let's look to see if we have something to say. And you could see at this link here that Chardae and I had something to say. And we thought it was good. We thought it's great that the FDA is saying to all future clinical trials that are being submitted, there should be, as a part of that, a racial and ethnic diversity plan. Really, really great step forward. But there was something missing in that, Chardae. What was that?
Yes, so I think the FDA guidance was really well in recommending that there actually be a plan in place to increase clinical trial diversity, and we're saying that's great, but what about the physician investigators? We think that's a really crucial piece that's missing.
Right. What about the diversity of the physician investigators? So on this next slide, you could see what we specifically suggested, that there should be a specific domain that they ask, not only for how many % of different racial and ethnic participants they're going to have, but what is the racial and ethnic diversity of the clinical physician investigators? And on the next slide, we provided them with specific literature that helps to support this. So we were not just coming up with this idea on our own, right? I mean, this has been shown in the medical literature. So now moving forward on the next slide, this is what we're really excited to talk about here today, is the National Center for Clinical Trial Diversity. And Chardae, when we looked this up, we saw there was no National Center for Clinical Trial Diversity. That's why we said we we need one, and it should be at Meharry Medical College. And because we are developing a partnership with a small but mighty private clinical research company in Nashville, we thought we're going to take the academic piece of Meharry and marry it with that corporate component. So Meharry has great research, and this is the meharryresearch.org website, and they've been a leader for a long time. And to have that then working side by side, a local organization that all they do is do biopharma studies, like Clinical Research Associates, is really great because this provides an additional site for our medical students and doctors to also learn and rotate from. And you got a chance to work over the summer at Clinical Research Associates. What was your experience?
I had a really great experience at Clinical Research Associates. They had a really, really good net of resources to be able to utilize for my specific research in terms of clinical trial diversity. And they actually, like I said, they created this intervention in terms of increasing their clinical trial diversity because during the pandemic, they noticed it was something that was actually a really big problem in terms of getting that representation of those diverse groups within their studies. And so I was just able to evaluate exactly what they had going on.
Summarizing again, that we are in this partnership together to be able to reach clinical trials really throughout the country in the academic environment and in the private research environment. So let's go to the next slide, which provides the main outline of what our vision is for the National Center for Clinical Trial Diversity. We believe there should be a new pipeline to develop new future physician investigators, and we're going to have an education and training program. And you can say the next bullet.
And we're also thinking about forming this national data warehouse of clinical trial diversity investigators. And this is just so as we're putting out more physician investigators to actually keep track of them and where they are.
And then we're going to also focus on data improvement and harmonization because that has been a big problem. And Chardae, you're going to talk more about this just in a moment. And tell us what the next bullet is.
And also we're going to focus on the racial ethnicity diversity score for clinical trial research centers, just to see how we're doing.
Yeah, because right now, when you see one clinical trial site or another, you don't know how well they do racial and ethnic diversity, right? We have no measure of it, so I think there should be.
Yeah, and that's something that I'll kind of give a little more information in terms of my experiences over the summer. I actually got to see this at CRA.
And then we certainly want to ourselves at Meharry and Clinical Research Associates be our own research demonstration center to show that we can be a center of excellence and do clinical trial diversity just as good as anybody else. Well, anyway, let's start with the future physician investigator and training program. Now you could go to the next slide. So what this is, Chardae, is going to be our vision is that we have about 110 medical students that graduate from Meharry Medical College every year. In addition to giving them their diploma, that we give them a certificate to say that they are clinical trial investigators and they have the basic education and training to be principal investigators of clinical trials. Now, this is really a major, major step forward, and that's why we call this How to Moonshot Clinical Trial Diversity, because we have seen data that every graduating physician will see 40,000 individual patients over their career. So what will that mean for your whole class? How many individual patients will your class see over their career?
This is like at least 2.5 million individual patients that my classmates will see. And this isn't just limited to those who want to become physician investigators. We have some students, of course, all going to become physicians, and one day they're going to be thinking, oh, clinical trials. They're going to be seeing their diverse patients and recommending them to these clinical trial sites. So it's something that's important for even those who don't want to further education and research.
That's a great point. We're not going to be having all of your classmates be clinical trial investigators. I have a feeling you will be. But at least now wherever they practice, they'll be thinking, oh, I've got to know where there are clinical trial sites. I want to get my patients into clinical trial studies. So we really want to focus initially on the medical students, but then we're going to expand this to residents, new physicians, and then as well as future physicians, those who are in public health or even bachelor programs that see themselves wanting to be physicians, and then we can also help educate them about how to become eventually clinical trial principal investigators. Now we're going to be talking about the next domain, which is the National Data Warehouse of Clinical Trial Investigators, because as we are building the 110 medical students from Meharry every year, they're going to be in this database, but there, of course, are Black and diverse clinical trial investigators who are already practicing, and we want to have one place where any sponsor of any clinical trial can go and see who is in this database and make sure that they have not only diversity in geography of where you're doing your clinical trials, diversity of the voluntary participants in the trials, but we want to say, please look at this investigators. Do you have diversity of who the principal investigators are, right? Because it is so important that we do that. There needs to be more of a focus on that, because that is what's going to get us, we believe, to getting more diversity in the clinical trial participants. Moving to the next slide, this reviewed what we had just mentioned, that we're going to create this national data warehouse for clinical trial diversity. Next slide then will bring us to the next domain, which is the Data Improvement and Harmonization Center for Clinical Trial Diversity. Now, this is something that you spent most of your time this summer working on. So why don't you tell us why this particular domain is so important to you because of what the work that you did this summer?
Right. So this summer, clinical trial diversity in general is something I really thought was interesting. It's really much a trending, buzzing topic in clinical research right now. But I also thought it was interesting how it didn't necessarily correlate to how we were doing in terms of improving clinical trial diversity. So I thought that one of the biggest problems I saw was that we weren't really assessing even the plans that we were putting in place to try to increase clinical trial diversity, despite all of its hype. So at CRA, I really wanted to see what they were doing. So they had that, like I said, the intervention, where it was mainly surrounding community outreach and engagement, where they pretty much focused on making partnerships with a bunch of community organizations in the area in Nashville, Tennessee, where they had underrepresented groups essentially have informative events there, had an on-site translator. They also were able to do some site translation to Spanish and Arabic, among other languages, in order to get those underrepresented groups within clinical trials. So I was thinking, okay, well, let's see how this worked. How did they do? And so one of my biggest challenges that I found that their database was really outdated. So a part of my job was to extract the demographic data after the intervention and before the intervention to try to do some sort of analysis to see how well they had done or if it even worked at all. And like I said, this is a really big problem. For example, we saw that participants who actually participated in studies after the intervention couldn't be included in the pre-intervention analysis simply because their charts will get updated and all of that information will be lost. So we saw a lot of missing data in addition to underreporting itself. So it's just really hard to keep up with that type of information when you have a data system that's that old. And so that's why we're really talking about making new data systems, because how are we going to know how well we're doing if we can't monitor and reevaluate the plans that we put in place?
So going back, Chardae, that was great, and I really was so proud to see you present at the Meharry Research Day. So in summary, this domain that we want to have as part of the National Center for Clinical Trial Diversity is going to address racial and ethnic data, quality, and gaps. So we want to build the scientific capacity to identify the quantity as well as the quality scope of the problem, to demonstrate gaps in the quality and consistency of racial and ethnic data reporting in clinical research trials, to identify best practices and new standards to enhance the quality of data, and really exciting, you came up with this idea, I think, that you wanted to have an annual scientific conference housed at Meharry Medical College in Nashville, Tennessee, where we could bring in the best researchers around the country and around the world to talk about some of the problems with documenting and improving racial and ethnic data science, how we can improve it and then implement it so that we can harmonize this data across all clinical research trials. So really, really great job on your work. Thank you. So we then thought, taking this to the next step, like, okay, we've made some advances and came up with some ideas for this National Center for Clinical Trial Diversity, but now we thought there should be a way that we would know one clinical research site versus another clinical research site. How well do they do racial and ethnic diversity? And so we came up with this idea of a score. So can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so this idea of the score is just to see how well each site is doing in terms of clinical trial diversity. And I really like this because it's almost like it's changing the culture of clinical research trials, I believe, because then it's like, oh, my site is, I won't say better, but it's essentially reaching new heights, a new level when it has clinical trial diversity included in it. It's more valid, it's more adequate, it's more accurate in terms of our results because we have clinical trial diversity.
Yeah, and we are hoping that this is something that we can develop, pilot, and implement so that it would be used routinely, and that every clinical trial site would know what it's doing well, what it needs to do better. And more importantly, sponsors of clinical trials, when they say they care about clinical research diversity, will be able to more easily identify those sites that will partner with them to achieve those goals. So a final domain of our National Center for Clinical Trial Diversity, and we can go to the next slide here, would be having a research demonstration center right at Meharry and Clinical Research Associates for improving clinical trial diversity. Because as much as we're going to build the pipeline, have a data warehouse, improve data overall, and come up with this scale, we want to do well at our own scale, right? So we want to have our own clinical trial diversity excellence center.
Yes, we want to lead by example.
And there we go with the next slide. There we go. I think you just said it, Chardae. Meharry will lead our way. We're going to create this research demonstration center for excellence. We're going to focus on genomics, which is a growing area, a lot of excitement in that, the community engagement focus, and your main area of research, the data improvement focus. So on our summary slide of Meharry Medical College, I think in the end, we're going to go to that next slide with the picture with a yes. So here's our summary slide, and I'll let you start.
Yeah, so we'll just sum it up by first saying that Meharry has a bright future to improve clinical trial diversity.
And we are going to build this National Center for Clinical Trial Diversity.
And we are focusing the pipeline of diverse physician investigators to lead clinical research trials.
Yeah, the mission of Meharry Medical College is longstanding. And it guides us to address this disparity in patient volunteers for clinical research trials through leadership. And that means also leadership principal investigators of each of the clinical trials. Going to the next slide is just another summary, once again, of what the 5 domains of this National Center for Clinical Trial Diversity will be. And the next slide goes over our leadership. We're really grateful to Dr. James Hildreth, who we got to meet with a couple times to update him on your work and our ideas. Dr. Jeanette Southpaul is the Senior Vice President and Chief Academic Officer. Dr. Anil Shankar, our Senior Vice President in the Office of Research and Innovation, and And of course, Chardae, thank you so much. There's a couple of websites for Meharry and Meharry Research. And our final slide is just to remind you how to moonshot clinical trial diversity. That's why we're here today, is to tell you that we can do it. We have to do it. We can build the pipeline of diverse principal investigators. And I can't wait to see your continued success, Chardae. You really have a lot of great ideas. I've always said you have great ways of articulating. You're organized in your thoughts. And I'm really just so appreciative and grateful to be working side by side with you.
Thank you. Same with you as well. And Dr. Caldwell, you shown me just how complicated a topic clinical trial diversity can be. And that's why we need more creative solutions. And this is how we start that.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. Please join us. We hope to get this up and running soon, but we can't do it alone. We need your support. We'd like your feedback and your ideas, so please reach out to us. And you'll be hearing from us again, right, Chardae? Yeah, we'll be back. All right.